You'll spend your whole life watching more successful men pass you by, my ex said during a rooftop celebration after receiving a promotion she never stopped bragging about. I quietly wished her well and walked away. A year later, she opened a luxury business publication and found a cover story detailing how my company had expanded across multiple states. You'll spend your whole life watching more successful men pass you by. Everyone around her laughed. I smiled. Not because it was funny, because I suddenly realized something she didn't. The rooftop was decorated with string lights and expensive catering, the kind of setup that announces, "I need you to know I've arrived." Brooke was holding a champagne flute, cheeks flushed from 2 glasses and one too many compliments. Her promotion had come through that morning, regional director of marketing at 31, and she wanted the world to feel the weight of that. I did feel it, just not the way she intended. "I mean it," she continued, tilting her glass toward me like a teacher correcting a student. "You're 33 years old and you're still planning. Planning, always planning." Meanwhile, she gestured around the rooftop, at the city skyline, at herself. "Some of us are actually doing." Mackenzie laughed first, then Haley, then 2 guys whose names I'd already forgotten by the time their mouths opened. I looked at Brooke for a long moment. She was waiting for me to flinch, to deflect, to make a self-deprecating joke that let everyone relax. I'd done it before, more times than I should have. Instead, I set my glass down on the nearest table. Slowly, without hurry. "I hope the new role treats you well," I said. Then I walked toward the exit. I heard the confusion behind me before I heard the door close. Someone said my name, not Brooke, one of the others. Brooke didn't say anything. I think she was still waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. I took the elevator down alone, stood on the sidewalk for a minute, and called an Uber. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. I just felt the strange, quiet clarity that arrives when you finally stop pretending something is fine. A year later, Brooke would open a luxury business publication at her apartment, the kind she kept on her coffee table to signal the life she was living, and she'd find a cover story. Photos, pull quotes, a full feature on a company that had expanded across multiple states in under 18 months. My company, my face, my name. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 33 when the rooftop happened, but Brooke and I had been together for almost 4 years by that point. We met the way a lot of people meet in their late 20s, through overlapping social circles, at a going-away party for a mutual friend neither of us was particularly close to. She was sharp and funny and had this confidence that read as self-assurance rather than ego. At least, that's what it looked like in the beginning. I was working in logistics consulting at the time and had been for 5 years. Good salary, steady clients, enough to live comfortably in a 2-bedroom apartment and save aggressively. But the plan, the real plan, was always something else. I'd been quietly building the framework for my own supply chain advisory firm since I was 30. Nothing visible yet. No flashy announcement. Just late nights after work, a growing network of contacts, 2 contractors I'd started doing small projects with, and a business account that was more promise than balance. Brooke knew about it from early in the relationship. In the beginning, she seemed to respect it. "You're one of those people who's actually going somewhere," she told me once, maybe 6 months in. Not just talking about it. I kept that sentence for a long time. Pulled it out when things got hard. I should have paid more attention to when she stopped saying things like that. The shift was gradual, almost invisible at first. She got her first major promotion around our 1-year mark, senior account manager, and something changed in how she moved through the world. Not dramatically, but noticeably, if you were watching. She started referencing salary more. Other people's salaries, titles, square footage of apartments. She'd meet someone new at a party, and within 20 minutes, she had a mental spreadsheet on where they ranked. "He's doing well," she'd tell me on the way home, about some guy we'd just met. "VP by 30. That's not easy." "Good for him," I'd say. "Don't you want that?" A title people actually recognize. I never answered that question the same way twice. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I knew no answer would satisfy her. There was one thing Brooke kept doing that I tried to ignore. I'll get to it. But first, I need you to understand what she was like before the comparisons became constant. Because she wasn't cruel at the start. She was ambitious, driven, intensely social. She genuinely believed success was a competition with a visible scoreboard, and she was playing to win. The problem was, I was never competing on the same board. The dinner conversations were where it started showing up most clearly. We'd go out, usually somewhere Brooke had selected, somewhere with a reservation and a waiting list, and the topic would inevitably drift toward people we both knew. Career updates, new apartments, relationship statuses reinterpreted through the lens of professional trajectory. "Did you hear about Zachary?" she said one evening, twirling pasta she wasn't going to finish. "He just closed a Series A, 22 million. "I heard," I said. "You two started around the same time, right? Consulting, different industries." Still, she let the word sit there. I picked up my water glass. "You don't think about it?" she pressed. "Competing at that level?" "I think about building something that lasts," I said. "Not something that raises money." She made a face. Not mean, just unconvinced. Like I'd ordered the wrong thing off a menu she'd already memorized. That was the version of the conversation we had maybe a dozen times. It always ended the same way. Me explaining my approach, her not quite buying it. Both of us moving on without resolving anything. The friend gatherings were worse. Brooke ran with a crowd that treated career achievement like a sport. Everyone was keeping score, and they weren't subtle about it. At any given gathering, there was a mental ranking happening. Who was rising? Who was plateauing? Who was falling behind? I was, apparently, falling behind. Dylan, a friend of mine, not hers, came to one of these events with me once and pulled me aside after an hour. "Does she always do that?" he said quietly. "Do what?" He gave me a look. "She just spent 15 minutes explaining to that guy in the blue jacket why your timeline is realistic but modest. She wasn't being mean about it. That's almost the problem." I didn't say anything. "She was performing," he said. Like she needed him to know she wasn't with someone who was falling behind. She just had someone who was choosing to take longer. I went home and thought about that for 2 days. The first major argument happened on a Sunday in February, about 8 months before the Rooftop. We'd spent the morning together and I'd mentioned, over coffee, that I was close to signing a second long-term client, the kind of contract that would let me transition out of consulting and into running my firm full-time. I expected her to be excited. "What does close mean?" she said. "Weeks. Maybe less." "You've said close before." "This is different. I have the proposal in their hands. They've come back with one round of revisions. It's moving." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something I've never forgotten. "What if this just isn't the thing for you?" I looked at her. "What if you've been so committed to this idea that you can't see it's not working the way you planned?" "It is working," I said. "It's just working on a timeline you don't respect." "I respect it." "You don't," I said. "You've been embarrassed by it for a year." That landed. She didn't deny it, which told me more than a denial would have. We recovered from that argument. Patched it over. Did what couples sometimes do when they're not ready to admit what's actually wrong. I should have paid more attention to what happened next. Brooke's promotion came through on a Tuesday. By Thursday, she'd organized a rooftop celebration with 23 people. I won't say I begrudged her that. She'd worked for the role. Regional Director of Marketing was a legitimate achievement, and she was genuinely good at what she did. I told her so, and I meant it. But I also noticed, in the 2 days between Tuesday and Thursday, that something had shifted in how she talked to me. Slightly elevated. Like the promotion had reshuffled the invisible ranking she kept in her head, and my position in it had dropped. The rooftop venue was exactly her style. An upscale bar with a private outdoor space, overlooking the city, accessible only if you knew the right people or were willing to pay the booking fee. Brooke knew the right people. I arrived on time. She arrived in a separate car, 15 minutes later, which I'd learned was intentional. She liked making an entrance to her own events. Mackenzie met me at the bar first. Brooke's closest friend, always reading the room, always managing optics. "You okay?" she asked. "Of course." "What?" She smiled in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just checking." I should have asked what she was checking for. The first hour was fine. Easy conversation. A few people I knew, several I didn't. The skyline was genuinely beautiful. I had one drink and nursed it. Brooke was in her element, moving through the crowd, receiving congratulations, talking about the new role with the particular energy of someone who'd been practicing what to say. She was glowing in the truest sense. Lit from the inside. I watched her and thought, I do still love this person, but not the version of her that's been showing up lately. The moment came around the 90-minute mark. Someone, I think his name was Greg, a friend of Haley's, asked me what I did. Standard party question. I gave my standard answer. Supply chain consulting, in the process of transitioning to my own advisory firm. Greg nodded the way people nod when they're waiting to say something else. "So you're still building it up?" he said. "Still building," I agreed. Brooke materialized at my side. He's very dedicated to the vision, she said. The way she said vision had a faint layer of something underneath it. Not quite mockery. Closer to condescension dressed as pride. Greg smiled. That's great, he said. Takes a lot of patience. It does, Brooks said. Then, lightly, to the small cluster of people who drifted toward the conversation, I keep telling him, there's no shame in taking a more traditional path. Not everyone builds an empire. Soft laughter. Comfortable laughter. The kind that happens when something slightly uncomfortable is wrapped in enough sweetness to go down easy. I said nothing. Brooke, maybe reading my silence as a green light, went further. You'll spend your whole life watching more successful men pass you by, she said. It wasn't vicious. That was the remarkable thing. She said it the way you'd point out that someone had spinach in their teeth. Practical, almost helpful, like she was doing me a favor by naming it. Mackenzie laughed. Haley laughed. Greg made a face that was trying to be sympathetic and landing somewhere near awkward. I looked at Brooke. She was waiting for me to laugh it off, to deflect, to say something like probably right and redirect the conversation so everyone could breathe again. I set my glass down on the nearest table. I hope the new role treats you well, I said. I said it without sarcasm, without venom. I genuinely meant it. Then I walked toward the exit. I heard my name once, not from her. A beat of confusion behind me, the energy of a room recalibrating. The elevator doors closed. I stood on the sidewalk in the cool air and pulled out my phone. I had a text from Ethan, my best friend, who hadn't been at the party, asking how the event was going. I typed back, leaving early. Talk tomorrow. He sent back a single question mark. I didn't explain. I called an Uber, rode home in silence, and sat at my desk for a long time looking at the business proposal I'd been refining for 3 weeks. The next morning, I ended the relationship. I called Brooke, told her I thought we'd arrived somewhere neither of us had intended, and that I didn't think continuing made sense for either of us. She said, "You're ending things over last night." "I'm ending things over the last year," I said. Last night was just the clearest version of something that's been there a while. She didn't fight it, which confirmed what I already suspected, that some part of her was relieved. I never contacted her again. The first 3 months were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a room is quiet when the noise stops suddenly and you realize how much of it you'd adapted to. I had more time, more mental space. I hadn't understood how much energy I'd been spending managing the slow erosion of being with someone who'd quietly lost faith in you. I spent that energy elsewhere. Ethan noticed the shift. "You're different," he said, maybe 6 weeks after the breakup. We were at his apartment, watching a game neither of us cared much about. "Different how?" "Focused," he said. "Like, annoyingly focused. You used to look tired at things like this. Now you just look somewhere else." "I'm here," I said. "Physically," he said. "Your brain is definitely at your desk." He wasn't wrong. The second client I'd been chasing, the one I'd told Brooke was close, signed 8 weeks after the breakup. A 2-year contract. Not transformational money, but enough to justify making the full transition. I gave notice at my consulting job on a Wednesday. My manager seemed genuinely surprised. He offered me a counter, better title, modest raise. I thanked him and declined. I registered the firm properly that same week. Brought on Dylan on a part-time basis to handle operations while I focused on client development. Found a small office space, 3 rooms, nothing impressive, a view of a parking garage, and moved in with 2 desks and a second-hand conference table. Connor came into the picture around month 4. He was a client referral, someone who'd worked with a contact of mine in the freight industry and had heard my name through a chain of 3 conversations. He was 61, had built and sold 2 distribution companies, and operated now as an informal advisor to small operations he found interesting. He called me out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon. "I've looked at what you're building," he said, without preamble. "You've got the architecture right, but you're sequencing wrong." "Meaning?" I said. "Meaning you're developing generalist offerings when you should be going deep on one vertical first. Pick the industry where you have the deepest contacts and build your first 3 case studies there. Then expand. And if the vertical slows down, it won't slow down faster than a generalist practice will starve," he said. I thought about it for 2 days, then called him back. "Retail distribution," I said. "That's where my strongest contacts are." "Good," he said. "Now go get 3 wins in retail distribution and don't talk to me again until you have." It became a working relationship that didn't have a formal name. Connor wasn't an investor. He wasn't a partner. He was something more valuable, someone who'd been where I was going and was willing to tell me, bluntly, what he saw. But I need to be honest about what those months actually looked like. Because it wasn't a clean upward line. There was a deal in month 6 that I was certain I was going to close, a regional grocery chain, mid-size, genuinely in need of the restructuring I was proposing. I spent 40 hours on the presentation. Custom analysis. 3 rounds of revision. They went with a bigger firm. I sat in my car in their parking lot for 20 minutes and did not feel okay. Dylan called while I was sitting there. "How'd it go?" he said. "Lost it." A pause. "That one you've been working on since September?" "Yeah." "Okay," he said. "Come back to the office. We've got 2 intro calls scheduled for next week." We keep moving. The opportunity that changed everything almost never happened. It came through Connor, indirectly, a contact of his who ran a 5-location outdoor retail brand and had just fired their 3rd operations consultant in 2 years. He was frustrated, skeptical, and looking for someone small enough to actually pay attention to his business. Connor gave him my number without asking me first. "You might hate me for this one," he said when he told me. "He's difficult." "How difficult?" He ended a call with my last recommendation by hanging up mid-sentence. "Great," I said. His name was Palmer. We met in person, his request, at a diner near his flagship store. He spent the first 15 minutes testing me, asking rapid-fire questions about specific operational problems, watching to see if I flinched or bluffed. I didn't bluff. A few questions I answered directly. 2 I said I'd need to look at his data before I could responsibly answer. He nodded. "The last 3 guys answered everything immediately," he said. "That's why I fired them." We signed 2 weeks later. That contract became the foundation of everything that followed. Palmer's business was more complex than it looked from the outside. 5 locations across 3 states, each with slightly different supplier relationships, inconsistent inventory systems, and a staffing structure that had evolved organically for 15 years without ever being examined. He knew it was inefficient. He just hadn't found someone willing to tell him the truth about it. I spent the first month doing nothing but listening. By month 2, I had a full operational audit. By month 4, we'd restructured his primary supplier contracts and reduced his average fulfillment lag by 31%. He told 2 people. Those 2 people told others. By the time we'd been working together for 8 months, I had 3 new inquiries from businesses in adjacent sectors, 1 wholesale distributor, 1 e-commerce fulfillment company, 1 regional manufacturing operation. All midsize. All frustrated with large consulting firms that sent different faces to every meeting. I brought Dylan on full-time. Hired a junior analyst named Alyssa, who was 2 years out of school and 3 times sharper than she presented in interviews. Moved into a better office. Nothing flashy, but real. Ethan noticed. "You seem different again," he said, during one of our regular dinners. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." He studied me. "Are you happy?" I thought about it. "I'm building something I believe in. I'm not thinking about whether someone else approves of the timeline. So yeah, I think that might be what happy feels like when it's not performance." He laughed. "Poetic. Don't tell anyone. Ruins the brand." It was around this time that Brooke started surfacing again. Not directly, never directly, but through the background noise of a shared social network. Haley mentioned her at a mutual friend's birthday. Apparently Brooke was seeing someone new, a finance director. Very successful, Haley said, with a look in my direction that I chose not to engage with. Her LinkedIn showed a 2nd promotion. She was doing well, by any visible metric. I felt nothing complicated about it. Genuinely. She was living the life she'd built, and I was building mine. But then Dylan mentioned something. We were reviewing a contract together, and he looked up from his laptop and said, almost casually, "Your ex reached out to me." I kept my eyes on my document. "About?" She said she wanted to catch up. Asked how things were going. Then asked how you were going. He watched me. "Specifically, what did you tell her?" "That you were busy." He paused. She seemed surprised. Like she expected a different answer. I didn't respond to that. We went back to the contract. But there was something underneath it. Something I'd learned the full shape of later. Something about Brooke's new relationship that wasn't what it appeared to be from the outside. I didn't have the full picture yet. I was about to get it. I should tell you about the first time I understood what was actually driving her. It was a conversation from early in our relationship, year 1, before the comparisons had calcified into habit. We'd been at her parents' house for a weekend, the first time she'd brought me there, and I'd noticed something I filed away and didn't examine closely enough. Her father was in commercial real estate. Self-made, legitimately successful, the kind of man who filled a room without trying. Her mother deferred to him instinctively. The whole household operated around his calibration of success. At dinner, he'd asked me about my work. I'd explained the consulting role, mentioned the firm I was building. He'd nodded, asked 2 precise questions that showed he understood what I was talking about, and said, "You'll get there if you stay patient." It was an offhand compliment, the kind a man gives when he's satisfied but not impressed. Brooke, beside me, sat fractionally straighter. I'd noticed. I hadn't understood. A year after the breakup, after conversations with Ethan that went long into evenings when we were both being honest instead of careful, I finally did understand. Brooke had spent her entire life performing for a man who measured everyone, including her, by visible success. She'd won that competition well enough to earn his respect, and so she'd internalized his scoring system completely. Success was a ranking. People were their titles. Love was conditional on position. She wasn't malicious. She was replicating. She looked at me and saw something her father would have called potential, but not a rival. And because she couldn't separate her own judgment from his, she treated me accordingly. That's what the comparisons were. Not cruelty. Calibration. She was constantly running the numbers to figure out whether I was going to be someone her father would approve of at the next dinner. And the numbers kept coming up uncertain. The rooftop was just the night she stopped hiding the calculation. What I didn't know, what Dylan eventually told me in fragments over 2 separate conversations, was that the finance director Brooke was seeing had represented, for her, the solved version of the problem I'd posed. Stable. Titled. Proven. Except that he was deeply unhappy in the relationship and had been almost from the beginning. Haley, who remained loosely in my orbit through mutual friends, mentioned it without intending to. Apparently, the relationship was managed more than lived. 2 people coexisting inside the appearance of the thing rather than the thing itself, which made a kind of sad sense. Meanwhile, the business crossed a threshold I hadn't fully seen coming. The e-commerce fulfillment client, mid-sized, third company to come through the Palmer referral chain, had a sister company in a different region that needed the same work done. They introduced us. That company had a partner in another state. That partner had a network. Within 6 months, I had active client relationships across 4 states. A staff of 9. 2 subcontractor agreements. A reputation in retail and e-commerce logistics that was being built by results rather than marketing. Connor called on a Tuesday morning. "You're past the hard part," he said. "I don't feel past the hard part." "That's how you know," he said. "The hard part doesn't announce itself leaving. You just look back one day and realize you've been past it for a while." An interview request came in from a regional business journal, then a trade publication. Then, through a connection Alyssa had cultivated without me knowing, a request from a luxury business magazine that ran features on emerging companies in consumer-facing logistics. I did the interview on a Thursday afternoon, sent photos, reviewed the draft. I didn't think much about it. I had too much actual work to do. Brooke found out on a Sunday. I know the details because she told me. Later, and because, apparently, enough people in our extended network saw it and talked about it that the scene became something of a minor story in itself. She'd been having brunch at her apartment with Mackenzie and another friend. The kind of late, slow Sunday morning that involves good coffee and a stack of reading material arranged on a coffee table. She kept a rotating selection of publications there, design journals, cultural magazines, a few business titles that signaled the world she operated in. The luxury business magazine was one she'd subscribed to for 3 years. She picked it up without looking at it first, started to flip the cover over, then stopped. The cover image was a wide shot, my office, our team in the background, me in the foreground with the kind of deliberately unstaged staging that good photographers manage. The headline was straightforward, "The Operator's Edge, How One Firm is Quietly Reshaping Regional Logistics." She said my name. Mackenzie looked up. Brooke didn't say anything else for a long moment. She just read. The article was 3 pages, longer than the typical feature. It covered the origin story, the Palmer contract, the expansion, the methodology. There were pull quotes. A sidebar on the company's approach to mid-market clients. A brief mention of my background in consulting. Nowhere in the article did it mention Brooke. Why would it? But the timeline was all there, unmistakably. The firm's founding date. The early contracts. The growth arc. All of it had happened after the rooftop. Mackenzie read over her shoulder for a minute and then sat back. "Wow," she said. Brooke closed the magazine, then opened it again. Mackenzie told someone, who told Ethan's girlfriend, who told Ethan, who told me. Not with any cruelty, just because Ethan's been my best friend for 12 years, and that's the kind of thing you tell your best friend. She apparently just sat there for a while. Ethan said. Not crying. Just quiet. Good quiet or bad quiet. Does it matter? I thought about that. No, I said. Not really. What I felt wasn't triumph. That surprised me. I'd expected something. Satisfaction, vindication, some clean click of the universe balancing its accounts. What I actually felt was tired. Not exhausted. Just the specific tiredness of realizing that a version of yourself spent years seeking approval from someone who was never capable of giving it the way you needed. And then I felt, underneath that, something cleaner, gratitude. Quiet, private gratitude that I'd walked off that rooftop when I did. Alyssa knocked on my office door that Monday. Did you see the traffic on the firm's LinkedIn? She said. I didn't. She showed me. The article had been shared. More interview requests were coming in. 3 new inquiry emails from potential clients who'd read the feature. It's a good week, she said. It's a good year, I said. She smiled and went back to her desk. The message from Brooke came that Wednesday. Her name appeared on my phone, and I felt nothing dramatic. Not racing pulse, not dread. Just recognition. The message was careful, considered. The kind of message someone drafts and redrafts before sending. I saw the article. I wanted to reach out and say that I'm genuinely proud of what you've built. I know things ended the way they did, and I haven't handled thinking about that well. If you ever want to talk, I'd like that. I read it twice. Then I set my phone down and went back to the proposal I'd been working on. I thought about it for 3 days before I responded. We met at a coffee shop. Neutral. Midpoint between where we each lived now. Brooke looked well. Polished in the way she'd always been polished. But something about her face was different. Less performance, more person. Like she'd been through something that had softened the edges. We ordered coffee. Sat across from each other. I didn't know how to start this, she said. You already started it, I said. Wednesday. She smiled faintly. You took 3 days. I needed to figure out what I wanted to say. And I thought about it. I don't have a speech, I said. I'm not angry. I was, for a while, but that passed pretty quickly once I got busy enough. I turned my coffee cup once in my hands. I think I needed the rooftop to happen. Not because it made me prove something. I was never really building the firm to prove something to you. But because I'd been tolerating something that wasn't working for longer than I should have. And that night was the clearest version of it. She was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology, she said. You don't need to. I want to. She looked at her cup. What I said that night, the way I said it, wasn't about you. That's not an excuse. But it's the truth. I had this very fixed idea of what success was supposed to look like, and I kept measuring you against it. And when you didn't fit the picture, She stopped. I made you feel smaller. I did that consistently, and I knew I was doing it. Yes, I said. You did. She nodded. I'm sorry, she said. I believed her. Thank you, I said. And I meant that too. We sat with the silence for a moment. Are you happy? She asked. I'm building something I believe in, I said. With people I respect. That's most of it. That sounds like yes. It might be, I said. She smiled, genuinely, without the calculated quality that used to sit underneath her smiles. I should have seen it, she said. What you were doing. What you were going to build. Maybe, I said. But I think you were seeing what you'd been taught to see. She didn't respond to that. But she heard it. We finished our coffee. Walked out together. Stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Take care of yourself, I said. You too. We went in different directions. I didn't look back. Not because I was making a point. There was no audience, no rooftop, no moment to perform. I just had somewhere to be. I drove back to the office. Alyssa had left a summary of the 3 new inquiry calls on my desk, each one color-coded in her precise way. Dylan was on a client call in the conference room, visible through the glass. I sat down, read the first inquiry, and started drafting a response. There are people who spend their whole lives measuring success by whoever's watching. I spent those years building something no one could take back. By the time she finally saw it clearly, I didn't need her to.